And that's what hooked me.
It'll work, right?
I thought, wow, hey, this is pretty good. And so he came back and we did go out hunting there at camp. I found my first silver ring hunting there in a tree. And his name was Len Martin. And he was one of the original founders of our club. Excuse me. A bunch of us used to go to Fort Wayne, because they had a metal detecting club in Fort Wayne. There were so many of us going up there. I mean, we was about half the Fort Wayne club. And we decided to just make our own club there in Warsaw. And so that's how that all got started. And that was in 1998. And Jeff said I've been on many organized hunts out east and down south. And amazingly, going on those hunts, I actually have found more and better Civil War relics here in Indiana than I did going on those hunts. You go out there, if you like finding bullets, I mean, there's bullets everywhere. millions and millions of bullets out there. And shell fragments and all kinds of things like that. You know, that's not really that interesting to me. I mean, there's a few other things along the side that is good. But my very best find in all these 41 years of metal detecting was a Alabama sword belt plate from the Civil War. It's one of their officers, and I actually found it in an old homestead site over by Beaver. And that plate is like the holy grail of Civil War relics. Everybody that was into Civil War relic hunting, that's the one thing that they really want to find. And I found it here in northern Indiana. And that plate is like $10,000 plate. So, I mean, that was nice to find too. So, and a lot of our other members, we've gone to those hunts together. So it's been fun. And I know that one of the things that all the members in our club really feel that metal detecting is fun, but it's actually a service too, because we have people, you know, that lose things, get in contact with us all the time. And the one good friend of mine, had a fellow from his church had his uncle had lost a gold jade ring over in Little Tippecanoe Lake, like almost 40 years ago. He said, "Do you think you could find that?" And I said, "Well, probably can." I said, "You know about where it's at." So I went over with him, and we walked out on his pier, and we walked out about 12 feet, and there was a little rowboat with a motor sitting off the side of the pier, and he says, he walked up the back of the boat, and he pointed his finger down, and he said, "You lost it right there." And I says, "Are you sure?" I says, "Has the pier always been here?" He says, "Yep, pier has always been in this position." I says, "How about the boat? Was it anchored in place?" No, he says, "The boat has always been right here, all 40 years of that, or even before that." So I hopped down in the water and come a detector out, and bing, 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 my very first signal, scooped it up, and never since then. And so he was very appreciative of that. His uncle couldn't be there because he was in really bad health, and I was sure glad that I found it for him. He was so excited, but he died shortly after getting his ring back, which was sad. So, and then another ring that I found over on, there's Coon Lake. There was a little camp over on Coon Lake, and out in the water there on their beach, I found a little classroom, and it was from Columbia City. So back then you didn't have the internet, you know, where you can find them easier on the internet to find people. So I took a trip to Columbia City and went to the library and got that year, you know, of the yearbook, and it was pretty obvious her initials were right there, and saw a picture of her. And so then, back then, what I would do is I would write down the names of as many of the men in her class as I could, which I got all our men in that class because it was such a small classes back then. And then just got on the phone and started calling those, and about the third person I called, she said, "Well, I'm actually the organizer of our class reunions." And so she looked that lady up, and she was in a nursing home in Mishawaka, Indiana. And so I got that number and called up there, and they didn't want to tell me anything, obviously, that she was even there, even though I knew she was there. And so she said, well, what's this about? And I told her, I said, well, I found a classroom, and I said, I know that it's hers. She said, well, just a minute. And she came back a few minutes later, and she says, her sister, not her sister, her daughter is actually here today, and to see her. And she says, that would be fantastic. And I said, well, I can come right now. She said, okay. So I hopped in my car and ran to Mishawaka and put that ring back in her hands, and she just started crying. And she says, you don't know how much this means to me. She says, my family couldn't afford to pay for this for me, and my grandparents scrimped and saved enough until they could get the money to buy it. Of course, this was during the Depression. And I said, well, how much was it? She says, it was $7. And so she just couldn't believe. And she said, well, do you know where you lost it? She said, no, I had no clue. She says, the reason it's so important to me is because the family was so upset when I lost it, because she lost it a week after she got it. And so it was, that was sad, but she was so happy to get it back. She said, man, I wish my mom and dad knew. And my grandparents. And another example like that is, I come from Huntington, Indiana, where I was born and raised. We always had a lake cottage up on Irish Lake. And so there's two camps. Our camp where I work, there's Camp Crozet State, and there's Camp Dick Runyon, where the Huntington YMCA's camp is right next to ours. And so out in their beach, I actually found another gold classroom. So I did the same thing, went to Huntington, got the yearbooks, and when I was going through the men's names in that year, one of her classmates was actually my student counselor in high school. And so I called him up and I asked him, well, do you know who she is? And he says, well, yeah, I know who she is. And I said, well, how about, where she lives and everything like that? And he says, she's my next door neighbor. And, so he got a hold of the husband, and she wasn't home from work yet. And so I talked to him on the phone, and he said, he told me where they lived, and he said, come down to the house. He says, he says, it's summertime, he says, the front door is open, there's just a screen door there. He says, when you get here, just come right in. Just walk right in. And I said, sure? And he said, yeah. And so I went there, and she had been home by that time, and I could see clear through the living room that she was out there in the kitchen, and I just walked in, and she was like, what is this? What is going on? And so he told her, I said, honey, he says, this guy's here for you. What? So I walked up to her and held my hand out, and he said, hold your hand out. She held her hand out, and I dropped that ring in her hand. And she stood there for a few seconds, not even realizing what it was. She just kept looking at it, and then you could see the look on her face. She says, that's my classroom. And so that was kind of exciting too. Other things that we do as a club, everyone in our club is, we're finding things for people all the time. But one of the things that, another thing that we look is property markers. People, they sell things. This particular, I had a friend from church that he said that the people, the property right next to him was sold, and those people wanted to cut down the trees along there. He says, I want you to come out, and as he said, I know where one property marker is, but I don't know where the other one is along that line. He said, I want you to come out so I can keep them from cutting those trees down. And so I went out, and that was hard to find, but I actually ended up finding it. We stepped back, he looked down the line all those clues to all those people's So you want to know what you ask. The most unusual thing that I've been asked to find, which I found, was a vocal cord vibrator. And he was right around the corner from where my mom and dad lived on a little Barbie leg, and he dropped it right off the end and disappeared. So I went over there, and I didn't even bother with my metal detectors. I thought he knew exactly where he dropped it, so I just went down there and fanned around. And sure enough, Tommy's vibrator. I don't know if it still works, but that's the most unusual thing I've actually. Okay. That's kind of the gist of that. I don't know if you want to try to show some of these now, Jim?
I'd love to, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Mind partnering a little. I do want to just really appreciate Mike also, that what he does is, I should have showed you this before, but not only, well, this is not the best example, but it works. Not only does he find these items and bring them to us, but he photographs them and then he labels them. So, and he'll research what they are. So when he brings a box from a given site, he's done as much research as he can. 8mm, 45 caliber bullets. C.M. Skinner, Clayton, New York, patent U.S. and Canada, 1874. That's a golf ball, obviously. Indianapolis Brewing Company bottle, which is right here. I don't want to steal your thunder on some of this, but I just really want to make that point too, that he's not just sort of bringing us a pile of stuff. He's documenting it, he's looking into what it is, and he's bringing us items that are, everything's of some historical value, arguably, right? But, so that's we really appreciate that. It's helpful. I don't want to steal your thunder, but we had some good dialogue on where to hunt. So, for example, and this can be our sort of Culver history angle too. Obviously, this beach, I know you've hunted here, but as many of you may know, right up the path here at the high point of what we historically is called Indian Trails in this woods was the Lakeview Hotel, and it goes back to the 1870s when the group of Plymouth businessmen that built it as a clubhouse and enticed the railroad to come through here up to Plymouth. So the Lakeview has a long, rich history. It burned down in 1929, and I think you found that on your own. See, that's the other thing. Mike does a lot of research ahead of time. I don't know how you find all this information. A lot of it's on the internet, I'm sure. But so he went to the Lakeview before we even, interacted, and then we had some conversations about other historical sites, particularly the campus of Culver, formerly Culver Military Academy, Culver Academies. So places like the homestead where Mr. Culver built his first house in the early 1880s. When he moved, he retired and moved there, and eventually is going to build the academy. And so I'm trying to remember which box has the homestead. This is the roost, I think. That's the roost. Oh, had the bottle. Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah. Here we go. And that one had the bottle? Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah. Do you want me to describe these? Do you want to? It's up to you. Either way.
It's just Indianapolis, Indiana Brewing Company. So somebody was a drinker over there.
Opened in 1887 and closed in 1948. It won medals at the St. Louis World's Fair, which of course the Culver family was from there, and the Academy cadets went there in 1904.
The most unusual thing about that site was there were bullets. Just bullets everywhere. It's amazing how many bullets were there. And there were targets everywhere too. So I know a lot of these places have been hunted because I've heard other guys that have hunted these too. And but there were so many targets that I thought, man, there's got to be at least some coins here. There wasn't a single coin over there. Not a single coin, which is really, really strange.
Mike, is this stuff underwater or?
Yes.
So yeah, all of what he's brought us, and what I don't know what if you almost always are in the water, but everything you've done here has been in the water, which I think is interesting because a lot of people metal detect on land, which is great. And I know Dale over there has brought us some things you found in the water off the campus with your metal detecting over at the Academy Museum. But I think the water thing's really it's interesting. It's got a whole other dimension. There's a lot of people aren't going to find those items without the process that Mike uses.
Jeff, where was the homestead at?
Yeah, so the homestead, you can almost see it from here, if not for the trees. It's right across basically from the Academy Golf Course. So it's really just on the northeast shore there. If you're familiar with where the Woodcraft Pier is today, not where it used to be, where it is today, it's just a few steps to the south of there. It's a really neat historic site. Everything looks like it did in the 1880s. So, you know, a lot of history there.
And Jeff, you were saying that's the original road around the lake the other day.
Yeah, that's right. So the path, if you take the path from the rowing center on campus, really at the far corner, eastern corner of the Culver Academy's campus proper, and you walk up that dirt path, you know, as if you're kind of going up across 117 from the golf course. That's the last piece that we know of, and there may be a piece in front of some cottages, but it's the last really accessible piece of the old road around the lake. In the 1920s, the road on the east shore was moved out to where it is today, and prior to that, it was just dirt wagon trail, you know, and so that's really that last little piece of that. So I always feel like I'm in a time machine when I'm standing there at the homestead site, which again lent some interesting, to me it just added interest to what Mike was able to find. Found these in September, the homestead site. Golf ball's not shocking, but this is the piece you labeled C.M. Skinner, Clayton, New York, patent U.S. Canada, 1874. What is that? Do you know? Is it
It's just a fishing lure.
fishing lure? Thank you. What a fisherman. What else? There was another cool thing. Oh yeah. You weren't sure what this is, and our assistant at the museum said, "Oh, that's a sugar cube." A sugar cube grabber, so to speak. It's not the right word. Tongue. Thank you. All kinds of little coins. Here's a room key number 4. So, I thought this is so not fascinating, except it's so weird. There's 52 brass grommets here. Somebody had a hard time with their curtains that day or something. And again, the little bullets. Can't remember what else. Yeah, lots of little bullets. It's just interesting. And again, the time machine feel, right?
What year would the bullets have been from? Is that?
It's hard to tell. Bullets. Bullets are bullets.
Musket ball in here he found. I assume that's older.
Musket balls, obviously.
Do you wear scuba gear when you do this?
Pardon?
You wear scuba gear when you do this?
No. No, I hung up to my neck.
And so you don't even have a mask or anything on? You just feel it?
No, I use the metal detector, and then as soon as I get the signal with that, I can I have a scoop here, and I'll locate where it's at. I'll tip my toe, and I just stick that in there and push
Oh,
it down.
scoop it up. I see.
Scoop it up. Yeah, if I had to dive down for everything, that'd be.
But that brings up an interesting point that you made to me, that when he's scooping, if he finds trash, so to speak, a broken glass, whatever falls into the scoop that's undesirable, he'll take it and dispose of it. So he's also doing the service of cleaning up our sort of lake bed as he goes.
That's what this is. My floating trash barrel.
Everyone needs philosophy. Just another quickly, the Palmer House Hotel is built in the 1870s by a Plymouth businessman named Palmer. It's going to change names to the Maxinkuckee Inn in the 1930s when the Culver family buys it, and then in the 50s it becomes the Culver Inn. A lot of you remember the Culver Inn, where today's recreated shack is on the campus, of course. That's where the original shack was in the Culver Inn. So Mike went out there, and there's a lot of things in here, but some neat spoons. We'll get them right back to the shack. There's this, I don't know, it's a bracelet, and you just look at the head of the woman. It looks like, and I know you can't see it, but you all can come up and look at these. She looks 1920s at the latest, I would think. Maybe late 19th century, early 20th. Locks. This one says St. Louis on it. Again, Culver family, St. Louis. What else?
You find any Indian relics at all?
Yeah, I do.
On the East Shore, maybe?
I haven't found any here.
Okay.
But we'll see. I've hunted up there a lot, and it's amazing how many are up there. I found quite a few up there.
Have you found any academy rings?
Yeah, not official ones with signatures on them.
Uh-huh.
They were the souvenir type.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, not a class ring per se. I will just say, as an enticement to come to the Academy Museum, we're open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 4. Anyway, there's a guy, a gentleman was selling, you may have read this, and I don't mean to take away from our program, but just a quick note, because along similar lines, a gentleman was selling a 1909 Culver class ring on eBay, and I wrote to him, as I tend to do, and said, you know, we're a museum, would you go down, it's rather expensive, would you go down a bit? And he said, tell me more, so I did, and then my phone rang, and he said, I looked you up, you're legit, I want to mail you this ring for free. 1909 is the first year Culver Military Academy had senior class rings, so he found it in a lake in Wisconsin while metal detecting, and so that was a pretty neat story. So we have it on display there, as well as a ring found by a medic on the beach at Normandy the day after D-Day. That's a Black Horse Troop ring, so that one is possibly our most meaningful artifact in the museum. Two things I want to point out that Mike found also. This is a U.S. Navy issue. This is a boat hook, right? And this you found close to the Culver Inn, but around the corner in what was known as, an area. There was a hotel called the Roost, but kind of in that general area. I would certainly assume this is from the Naval School, which opened in 1902. And in those early years, we had U.S. Navy issued surplus that we used. And look how, just what wonderful condition. Of course, that's another thing Mike does, is cleans things up. Before he gives them, it's just amazing. The check's in the mail, but so there's that boat hook. And both Dale and Mike, at different times, this was maybe 5 years ago or more, you brought me one of these, and Mike did too. So one of the things that happened outside of the Legion Memorial Building on the Culver campus, that whole area there was kind of a living memorial to particularly World War I veterans, or World War I servicemen who graduated from Culver Military Academy and died in the war. And so in the years after 1918, the school planted a number of trees in honor, each one in honor of these men. And so this one is Clarence Smith, 1901, who this was planted by General Roman Gorecki of Poland in 1933. Not planted, but the tree was planted and the plaque was put here. So a number of these ended up, at least some of them, at least two for sure, ended up in the water because as the trees would, die or be cut down or whatever, well, not cut down, they usually would die or fall down in a storm. Of course, this stuff ended up somehow in the lake. So, again, a pretty meaningful piece to have. We have some others at the museum, but it's really, to me, quite interesting to find them in the water, kind of part of in the wild, as they say on the internet. What else so many things. Show and tell here, right? This is more found outside the Roost, so kind of close to the Naval Swimming Pier, which is more of kind of where the summer camp watercraft stuff happens today outside Legion Memorial Building. Everything from a salt shaker. This is a musket ball. It's like lead. It's a big heavy thing. Spoons and forks. I thought one of them had a date or a name of the hotel on it or something, but yeah, there's a Palmer House one, isn't there? Yeah, there's one marked Palmer House. Yeah, the Palmer one has one. That's right. Uniform buckles. Imagine that. Some poor cadet. Yeah. So again, I would invite. I'm not going to take everything out, but you all are welcome when we're here when we're done to just walk up and kind of take a look. This one, yeah, the ski pier, right? So this is neat. This eagle, it's very dated. We don't use it. We haven't used anything like this for years. Whether it went on a hat or it was a pin. It's got a pin on it, but Culver uniform buttons. Several of those. Somewhere, here's a Culver souvenir ring. Let me find it. Yes, this is the Culver Woodcraft. Oh, it's a Culver Woodcraft Cub ring. Some poor little guy.
Mine. I think that's mine.
Yeah. Get it right to you.
If it fits, you can have it.
But anyway, just all sorts of things. Fascinating little spoons. There's a compact mirror, a compact piece, I think, right? Or no, lipstick tubes, metal lipstick tubes. So anyway, I didn't, and I should have brought the sword. There's a saber, but the blade, am I right? The blade's missing. So it's, no, the blade's there, the handle's
It's in the sheath.
It's in the sheath. It's stuck in, it's like rusted into the sheath. So there's a cadet saber that he found that's rusted in the sheath. I think the handle's gone. Yeah, so,
Can I ask, if you're a metal detector, but you find things that aren't metal, how does that work?
Like bottles, sometimes when I'm digging, these bottles have laid down there under the water for so long that there's some kind of a process where stuff builds up in them and they get air in them. And I'll be digging a target and all of a sudden, bloop, the bottle will pop out.
Oh, okay.
So that happens quite a bit, actually.
speaking of which, this is one you said was something you've been looking for
Yeah,
for a long time.
I've collected bottles my whole life, but I've never found a little bob top. And I found it right down here in front of the Lakefront Hotel.
Yeah, so just several hundred yards that way in the water. So at these date, I don't know, they quit making them in the early 20th century, I think, or
Yeah,
somewhere in there. And you can see it, got the stopper you pull up. And so,
Do you do any magnet fishing? Do you do just, magnet fishing is a big deal,
it is a big deal, but all you can find that is iron. So, I do have magnets. Actually, I didn't bring that. When I'm in these really old sites, I mean, they're just littered with iron and stuff like that. So a lot of times I have a rare earth magnet on a pole, just like that pole there. And I'll go around and I'll suck up a lot of that iron to get it out of the way so that I can then use my detector and find the better stuff underneath it. As far as taking the magnet, throwing it out like that, it's just gonna bring in nails and stuff like that.
Mike mentioned the first find you brought us, actually, and I apologize I didn't bring it because it's in the historical society collection. I just didn't think about it, but right where we are, basically, Ed Morris had a boat building operation, and I've only ever seen one else, and it was affixed to an old boat that someone had in the park that they brought up. But he operated, when did he stop? In the early 20th century. But so Morris Boat Livery, and he had these little metal plates that he would affix to all his boats, and Mike found at least one, I think a couple of them.
Or just one.
Just one, okay. Just one of those. But anyway, so 1890s, 1880s, somewhere in there. So.
And Morris also had two sisters, one of whom was an ancestor of Jeff in Maryland, and the other one was an ancestor of mine. So Ed Morris is an important character in
Right. And operating right around here. In fact, I believe his boathouse became the bathhouse, made of wood, right over there. Burned down in the early 1930s, and that led to this beach lodge being created by the WPA in 1937. So, there's all these little connecting points.
Mike, the boat hooked there, did you just find the metal piece, or was the pole intact?
Can you believe that pole was there? No, I put the pole on.
Oh, you did? Oh, you didn't tell me that. That's in great shape. It's a miracle.
I couldn't resist. I thought, that has to have a pole.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure that probably had like a 10-foot pole, because they were usually long.
So about 20 years ago, a doctor lent his presidential Rolex to his son, and he was going to go water skiing. And jet ski. And the kid put the Rolex on, took off, and he gave him the Rolex so he wouldn't be late for parade. And of course, the Rolex ended up in the south end of the lake. So there is a presidential Rolex in the water down there
Somewhere.
somewhere.
Do we have a general radius or just south?
I think you're a little too interested.
Yeah, there's Tom Kelly owns Kelly. He has Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, Cadillac in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He has a house up on Big Tippy Lake. And he got a hold of me too to help try to find. He has a $30,000 ring.
Oh, no.
He was on a jet ski too. And he was going back and forth in front of his house. And he says he doesn't know where he lost it. But he says it's out there somewhere. So, I hardly here as far as I could. He was out further than that, but it's awesome. And there's a lake in Elkhart. I can't remember the name of the lake. It's Simonton, I think it is. there's a gold coin off of a necklace laying in that lake up there too, but the guy had to skiing and fell, and when they got back and boat, it was gone. So it's amazing how people lose things, but people lose them all the time.
Well, and so the DNR in the late 1980s did a survey of our lake and said they documented 15 full or partial remains of steamboats in the lake. And as we were just actually discussing this earlier, about 1915 or so, when the roads are paved and everybody's got cars, the steamboat tourism industry dried up almost instantly. So a number of these ships, some probably sank by accident during the peak, but some were just sunk on purpose. There were more trouble to get rid of than they were to keep. So, you know, you can metal detect out there if you find a steamboat. I'm sure they're not easy to find, but and of course, you know, when the railroad ran along the lake shore, I know there's at least one train wreck on the west side. You know, there's all sorts of stuff out there. It'd be fascinating, but there you go. I mean, that's the thing. All these mysteries under the water, as you say, people lose things, and there's no way we're going to find them without someone like Mike and his compadres to, you know, metal detect. So,
So
I
Jeff,
agree, it's a service.
the old Yarnell is not out there.
No.
Okay.
No.
Lots
The
of-
Arnell was the intentionally sunk was the Revluck. Everybody knows what Revluck is, right? What's the word? Culver spelled backwards. Yeah. So the Revluck was owned by Culver Military Academy and sank in the 60s for purposes of scuba diving, and so it's out off of it's off the east shore there. Oh, yeah, and so the other the main sort of flagships like the Yarnell and the Fowler, those were taken out of the water and, you know, disposed of rather than sank. Yeah. Any questions for Mike on how he does what he does, or do you want to add anything?
I know since I started hunting down here, the things along Culver Academy, it's just thick out there. It's amazing. This thing here, I started out with just these little things on here is the way I always hunted with this thing. I had to add these on there because it was so heavy. It was single. I mean, there is just unbelievable amount of stuff out there.
Mike, do you need permission for any of this?
Not in public lakes, not in permission. You go on any private property, obviously you have to get permission.
Yeah, if you didn't know our lake, and as you say, I don't know what a public lake, how it's defined, but the state DNR manages waterways, and they are public. So, I mean, I've had people say you can't stand in that water. Yeah, you can. It's a public lake, but you can't necessarily access it. Obviously, you have to get to the water through someone's property. So, yeah.
I don't have a boat per se other than a little John boat, but I have a kayak that I love. And so a lot of places I go, I'll use my kayak to get there.
And you can take your detecting.
Yeah, I take everything.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if everybody got a chance to see your scoop. Is this something you custom made or?
Well, you can buy a scoop that design, but they're about $150. So I got the welder out and made them home. Didn't do a very good job. I don't know what kind of stainless steel this was, but wow, did I have a hard time. Typically, I'm a good welder, but I don't know what that stainless steel was, so I had to really make it look like that, but it works.
So, Mike, if you fired that up now, what are the odds that you might actually find something?
Oh, it's 100% off. It may not be good in a park like this. It's just loaded with stuff. You know, the places that I hunt in the water too, I love to find the old beaches because and the nastier the water, the better, because that's places that nobody else wants to go. In Huntington, in Warsaw, the beach right there on Center Lake, everybody has hunted that beach area. The beach area to the west is where almost everybody hunted, and on the east side is reeds and muck and everything, and hardly anybody ever hunted there. And during COVID, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go over there and hunt that side of the pier. because they wouldn't let anybody swim off the pier. The lifeguards were out there. And so I went out there and started hunting out there, and I started finding whistles. I don't know how many whistles I found. So I gave those back to the lifeguards. Great. You know, I gave them the sunglasses and everything. But in that area that was probably up to my neck and back, probably about no more than 12, 15-foot square area there, I found over 1,000 coins.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of jewelry. And it was just, I couldn't believe it was so much. It just kept coming and coming and coming. I thought, wow.
So how would you explain it? Because it was mucky, was it not mucky in the past? Or was
No.
it always mucky but things moved over there?
No, it wasn't monkey.
I see.
They used both sides of the pier when they first started swimming there. Or when they had the pier out there. And for some reason, I don't know why, but they gave up on one side. I think they probably didn't have enough lifeguards to watch the whole thing, so they just made them all swim on one side. And it's the same way over on Pike Lake in Waukesha too. I did the exact same thing there. I hunted on the mucky side of the pier, and I don't know how many gold rings pulled out of that. Silver.
How deep will that thing go for you?
It'll go, well, I was, on one of my hunts out east, I was hooked my elbow, and actually when I was done, one of my friends was watching me dig us the whole time, and I found a Civil War, US plate. And it was, I couldn't believe how deep it was, and I thought, man, I'm gonna measure that. So we measured, it was 26 inches.
In the mud? Or in the
No, this was
26
out on the
inches of
field.
water? Oh, on the field? Okay.
It was out east.
Yeah, really good. Okay. Interesting.
And so I had this paper here. I can pass this around if you're interested. There's, some of these things, and I have the one gold coin.
Right, and the little car. You're saying where was that?
No, did you see this picture?
Yes, yeah,
okay.
yeah. I don't remember why I didn't bring it.
No, that's
I was
okay.
sort of grabbing things. Yeah.
But this kind of gives you an idea of,
You remember where that was? Was that?
that was all the way along.
Just along the shore of the
Along the
campus.
shore there,
Okay.
As far as how many coins you can actually find, this was just one hunt that I found all this stuff. And there's 73 coins. And most of those coins were by the roost.
Okay.
I had emailed Jeff, I said, is there a wishing well there or something like that? I mean, there's just thick there.
And I'm assuming that probably may have related to the shack and the inn. People had their money in hand and got on the boat pier and, you know.
Oh, another thing, this is over in front of the Winona Hotel. Found those two guns.
Wow.
And they were in such good shape, and they were actually still in their cases. I mean, there was ammo in the cases, and cleaning rods and everything. So I took those down to the police station, and obviously they did a search, and they had been stolen. So those made it back to the owner.
Mike, do you ever sell any of the things that you find?
I've only sold that one ring. I told you.
The very first ring. Okay.
That's the only thing I've ever sold. And I've given stuff away. And I sold that, and you know, as nice a ring as that was, I think I only got $65. But that was back when gold wasn't what it is now. But I thought, you know, that's when I thought, you know, I don't think I want to sell this stuff. You know, I'm not going to get that much for it. And one of my trips out east was in Virginia at a Civil War battlefield. And we went out there, and I found a few things, but when I came back, it was like a week or two later, I went to a site down by Wabash, and I found these two Virginia Civil War buttons. And those buttons were, you know, better than any of the ones that the other guys were finding out
In Virginia.
in Virginia. So that's kind of amazing.
Is this on private land?
This was on, down at the, Mr. Sinawal Reservoir.
So you're allowed, I mean, there are certain areas that you can't go without permission.
Yeah.
Especially a battlefield, is that private?
Oh, they're on private.
Yeah.
Yeah, these were organized hunts that I went on, so they did, all the research ahead of time, made sure it was on. And some of the old beaches, there's some of the kind of coins and things. This was just one hunt. Just had a little beach. So, anybody wants to look at that?
I was gonna say, if anyone wants to come and just kind of browse, look around, I'm sure Mike will answer all kinds of questions. If you don't mind, John, before I forget, unless you want to do this, our summer theme after today for our programs, and hopefully everyone got one of these. If you didn't, there's stacks of them here. Our theme is centered around more of the arts. So John is going to be presenting on the visual arts in Culver, so painting, drawing, sculpture, that sort of thing, which is a rich subject. Dan Adams and I, everyone knows Dan Adams, I think, will speak about the performing arts, mostly theater. Of course, Dan's been a founding member of the Maxinkuckee Players, but we'll go back further than that as well. That's on July 12th. August 9th, our annual fundraising concert is the Dave Bennett Quartet of the Culver Legion Memorial Building. And if you miss that, or if you don't miss that, you can come back a week later. I believe it's 1 week, 1 week later. Same building, same room, beautiful Legion building where Major Bill Brown will present on Culver's music and I think perform some things, right?
We'll have some live performances.
Yes,
Oh, nice.
yes. These are songs, musical pieces dedicated to or featuring Culver and Lake Maxinkuckee. And then, of course, our annual Stories and Stones at the cemetery, September 29th. We have a number of local pillars featured as subjects of that event. So thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for Mike.